For more now on what's happening in Venezuela, I'm joined by Ron Ahnen, politics professor at St. Mary's. You specialize in global and regional politics with a specialty in Latin America. What do you make of this very bold attempt to regain, well, not regain, but to try to get power here? Do you think it will be successful?
Well, I think it actually has already failed. What we see is another main opposition leader, Leopoldo Lopez, as well as Guaido, taking refuge in the Chilean embassy. We see 25 different troops that have taken refuge in the Brazilian embassy. So basically, with no widespread support from the military, even though you see the thousands of supporters on the streets, basically this attempt has failed.
So how do you get that military support?
Well, it's up to the military to decide. I think that what Maduro has is a very loyal members of the military, and until they decide that they're going to change their minds, then I think the situation is going to be pretty much the way it is. I think that from the United States point of view, however, we should not be supporting or calling for any attempts at violence. I think this kind of stuff is irresponsible. I think it's going to lead to a lot of unnecessary bloodshed. You have political polarization in Venezuela, and the way that you deal with that is through dialogue. So I think the United States threatening violence by saying all options are on the table or supporting these violent uprisings is really not the way to go.
John Bolton, though, U.S. National Security Advisor, said that the Trump administration was waiting for three key officials, including Maduro's defense minister and head of the Supreme Court, to act on what he said were private pledges to remove Maduro. What do you make of that? When you talk about discussions, is that what you're referring to?
Well, I'm referring to not just discussions with those who might be opposition leaders of Nicholas Maduro, but also with members of the military and with members of Maduro's cabinet. I think there has to be honest dialogue between the opposition and with Maduro. I think Maduro would be willing to go under some circumstances. I don't think he'd be willing to redo the election. The elections did have problems. On the other hand, the claim for Juan Guaido as presidency is based on a very strained interpretation of the Constitution that says whenever the president isn't there, then the president of the National Assembly becomes president, and obviously there's a president there. So if we really want to support democracy in the region and in Venezuela in particular, and if we want to support human rights, then we're going to have to do so in ways that are not violent. And
what might those ways be?
Well, I think that we can offer to support a more deepening dialogue. Mexico and Uruguay, who are sort of seen as neutral players, have offered to support those kinds of talks. The Group of Lima needs to cut back a bit on supporting Guaido at all costs. And then we need to make promises that we are going to step up with financial aid and humanitarian aid, because really the people who are paying the price for this is the Venezuelans.
That's what we're watching here, Professor. As this power struggle continues, it really is the people of Venezuela who are suffering the most here, a major humanitarian crisis happening there.
Absolutely, and it only deepens with every day. We do see some movement, for example, on the part of Germany and Canada. Those governments have said, wait a minute, this uprising was not in the cards. They're also part of this Lima group. So I think that what we need to do is, again, go back to having a real dialogue, figuring out how they can, through diplomatic efforts, resolve this crisis. It's really going to be up to the Venezuelans.
All right, we'll see what happens from here. Thank you so much, Professor. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.